Arcturus Station smelled like recycled air and ambition, which was probably what happened when you shoved two species, who'd spent decades not shooting at each other, into a converted mining facility, and told them to play nice. Finn Drake had been here 3 months, long enough to stop flinching when Valente warriors walked past in the corridors. Their elongated ears tracking sounds human hearing couldn't catch, but not quite long enough to feel comfortable with the whole arrangement. The station hung in orbital space above a gas giant nobody wanted, which made it perfect neutral territory. Humans brought their technology and their tendency to solve problems with increasingly complex solutions. The Valente brought their warriors and their cultural conviction that most problems could be solved by hitting them harder. So far, nobody had started a war in the cafeteria, which the brass considered a roaring success. That Finn's job was security specialist, which sounded impressive until you realized it mostly meant checking that doors locked properly and making sure drunk personnel didn't try to space a walk without suits. Exciting stuff. His mother had probably imagined something more heroic when he'd enlisted, but that was before she'd learned the military spent 90% of its time on paperwork and 10% on everything else. He was tracking a misplaced security scanner, following its signal through corridors that twisted like someone had designed the station while drunk when he walked straight into the Valente training grounds. Not his finest moment. The door had been open. The scanner's ping was coming from inside, and Finn had been too focused on the handheld tracker Tonitus. He'd crossed from human territory into theirs. The training ground went silent. About 20 Valente warriors, mid-exercise, turned to stare at the human who just wandered into their space like a lost tourist. Finn looked up from his tracker, registered his mistake, and tried to calculate whether backing out slowly would make things better or worse. "Sorry," he said, because sometimes humor was better than panic. "I'm looking for my scanner. It's about this big, deeply stupid, and clearly has no sense of boundaries. Anyone seen it?" One of the Valente, a woman whose white skin practically glowed under the training ground lights, stepped forward. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a warrior's braid, and her ears, those distinctive long ears that marked her species, were angled forward in what Finn had learned meant focused attention. She wore training gear that looked like it had seen actual combat, and she moved with the kind of confidence that suggested she'd won most off the fight she'd been in. "You interrupt our exercises," she said. Her voice had an accent, vowels stretched slightly longer than human standard, consonants crisp. "You enter without requesting permission." Finn glanced at his tracker. The scanner was definitely in here, probably kicked into a corner during sparring. He looked back at the warrior woman, noting how the other Valente had shifted position, forming a loose semicircle that wasn't quite threatening, but definitely wasn't welcoming either. "In my defense," Finn said, "the door was open. I was raised to believe open doors are invitations. Also, my scanner has terrible manners, and I apologize on its behalf." The woman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Amusement maybe, or possibly anger. Finn had survived 3 months here by learning to read Valente body language, but this one was harder to parse than most. "I am Commander this den," she said, and Finn felt his stomach drop slightly because everyone knew that name. The Ghost of Meridian. The warrior who'd held a defensive position against 4 enemy battalions. The legend who'd supposedly killed a Corvan shock trooper with a broken rifle. "You are the human security specialist, Finn Drake." It wasn't a question, which meant she'd bothered to learn his name, which probably wasn't great. People in charge only learned your name when you'd impressed them or pissed them off. And Finn was pretty sure he hadn't impressed anyone lately. "That's me," Finn said. "I'd offer to shake hands, but I'm getting the sense you're not thrilled about me being here." Finn took another step forward. The other Valente remained still, watching. The training ground had the kind of silence that preceded either violence or very awkward conversations. "You walk into our space," Finn said slowly. "You show no difference. Perhaps you believe humans and Valente are equals now. Yes, that our alliance means you need not respect our protocols." Finn held up the tracker. "I believe my scanner is in here and I'd really like to retrieve it before my supervisor asks why I lost another one. This is the 3rd this year and I'm running out of excuses." Wrong answer, apparently. Finn's expression hardened, and Finn mentally added this to his list of diplomatic failures. The Coalition was paying him to maintain security, not to antagonize legendary Volente commanders. He should probably work on that. I issue formal challenge, Thien said, and the words had weight ceremonial significance that made the other Volente straighten. You will foresee in sparring combat. If you survive without dishonor, you may retrieve your equipment and leave. If you refuse, you demonstrate the humans talk of alliance but lack the courage to stand before us as equals. Finn blinked. This was definitely not in the security specialist handbook. He glanced at the other Volente, hoping someone might intervene with a just kidding or the commanders having a rough day. But they all looked deadly serious, so Finn said carefully. My options are get my ass kicked by a legendary warrior or cause a diplomatic incident by refusing. Correct, Fisson said. Finn thought about his life choices, thought about how he joined the military for education benefits, thought about how his recruiter had definitely not mentioned anything about ritual combat with alien commanders. He looked at this Den, who stood waiting with perfect stillness, and made a decision. Okay, he said, but if I die, I want it noted that this started because of a scanner. I want that on my memorial plaque. Here lies Finn Drake, killed by technology's betrayal. Something might have been a smile crossed Thisson's face. Too quick to be certain. She gestured to the sparring circle, a raised platform in the center of the training ground. Finn walked toward it, trying to remember everything he'd learned about Volente combat styles, which wasn't much beyond they're very good at it, and try not to die. The crowd of warriors parted to let him through. Finn climbed onto the platform, setting his tracker carefully at the edge. He shrugged off his uniform jacket and started pulling his shirt over his head because fighting in full uniform seemed like a bad idea, and also only had 2 clean shirts left this week. As the fabric lifted, exposing his back, Finn heard Thisson make a sound. Not a word, just a sharp intake-off breath. He turned, shirt halfway off, and saw her standing frozen at the platform's edge. Her aggressive stance had collapsed entirely. She was staring at him with an expression that looked like shock, disbelief, and something else he couldn't name. Commander, one of the other Valentines said quietly. Thisson didn't respond. She was staring at Finn's back at the tattoo that covered his shoulder blades and upper spine. The extensive military insignia rendered in black and deep blue that marked his service in the Coalition's Special Operations Group. Shadowland specifically, a unit most people had never heard of because that was the point. Finn pulled the shirt the rest of the way off, concerned now. Is something wrong? This voice, when she finally spoke, was stripped of all its ceremonial challenge weight. It sounded raw, almost vulnerable. Where did you get that mark? The training ground had gone from silent to absolutely dead quiet, which Finn was pretty sure qualified as an upgrade in bad situations. He stood on the sparring platform, shirtless, holding his uniform shirt like it might shield him from whatever was happening in Commander Thiston's head. Her white skin had gone even paler, if that was possible, and her elongated ears had flattened slightly back against her skull and waved learned was a Valentine stress response. The tattoo, Finn said, trying to keep his voice light despite the sudden weight in the air. Got it about 8 years ago. Military tradition. You serve in certain units, you get the ink. It's like a very permanent membership card, except instead of discounts, you get mysterious medical problems and trust issues. Finn climbed onto the platform in known smooth motion, crossing the distance between them faster than Finn would have preferred. She moved behind him before he could turn, and he felt her presence there like static electricity, close enough that he could hear her breathing. Shadow Lance, she said quietly, and Finn realized she was reading the insignia. Most people couldn't parse military unit markers, but apparently legendary Volente commanders could. Coalition Special Operations Group Designation, 773, Operation. She paused and her voice dropped even lower. Operation Granite Shield. Finn's stomach did something complicated. Granite Shield wasn't classified anymore technically, but it also wasn't something people brought up at parties. The mission had been 8 years ago, a rescue operation on Corin 4 during the tail end of the proxy conflicts, back when humans and Volente had been testing whether cooperation was possible or just another word for mutually assured destruction with extra steps. Yeah, Finn said, because denying it seemed pointless. I was part of that operation. This moved back around to face him, and Finn saw her hands were shaking slightly. Not with anger, with something else entirely. The other Valente warriors were watching their commander with expressions ranging from confusion to concern, clearly uncertain what was happening, but aware it was significant. You were part of the extraction team. This said, not a question. A statement that somehow demanded confirmation. Anyway, Finn said he remembered Granite Shield in fragments the way he remembered most operations from that period. Intelligence about a high-value Valente prisoner. Political pressure to attempt rescue as a gesture of potential alliance. The prison facility on Corin IV with its modular construction and terrible lighting. Fighting through corridors while explosives provided cover. Finding the detention level, the Valentine warrior, wounded and barely conscious, who he'd carried through smoke and weapons, fire to the extraction point. Thysson's leg cimento gave out slightly. She sat down on the platform edge, which was probably the least warrior-like thing Finn had ever seen a Valente do. Her carefully maintained combat posture had evaporated entirely. 3 weeks, she said, more to herself than to him. They held me 3 weeks. Interrogation about defensive positions, about fleet movements, about things I would not tell them. And then one night, humans came, moved like shadows, killed the guards. Someone carried me. She looked up at Finn, her eyes searching his face. You carried me. Finn sat down too, because standing while she sat felt wrong somehow. I carried someone. We didn't exactly have time for introductions. The facility was coming apart. The extraction window was about 4 minutes and you were bleeding pretty badly. I remember getting you to the transport, handing you off to the medical team, and then we were gone. I never learned their names. This said, the humans who saved me. Special operations does not work that way. Yes, no names, no recognition, just mission completion. I survived. That was supposed to be enough. One of the other Valente warriors approached cautiously. Commander, should we leave? Thysson said not unkindly. All of you training is finished. The Valente filed out slowly, clearly reluctant to abandon their commander, but unwilling to disobey a direct order. Finn watched them go, then turned back to Thysson. She was staring at his tattoo again, as if the ink might rearrange itself into different information if she looked long enough. So Finn said, because silence felt heavier than words. This ice awkward. I challenged you to combat, and you were preparing to probably destroy me. And now it turns out we have history. Weird history. History involving prison breaks and bleeding. Thysson made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something breaking. I have spent 8 years wondering about that night, wondering who they were. Those humans who came when my own people could not reach me. Wondering if I imagined how one of them carried me like I weighed nothing even though I was dead weight, and we were under fire. You didn't weigh nothing. Finn said you were actually pretty heavy. Valente bone density is higher than human standard. I had bruises for weeks. My team medic said I was stupid for carrying you instead of dragging you. The dragging seemed undignified, and I was trying to make a good impression on behalf of humanity. You made jokes, Thysson said suddenly. During the extraction, I was barely conscious, but I remember you were carrying me through a prison facility while people shot at us. And you were making jokes about hoping the exit was clearly marked because you'd failed the navigation portion of training. Finn felt heat rise to his face. Yeah, well, humor under pressure. It's either laugh or scream, and screaming uses more oxygen. Thysson stood up and Finn stood with her. She was taller than him by about 3 in, which most Valente were compared to humans. She reached out slowly, and Finn held very still as she touched the tattoo on his shoulder, tracing one of the insignia lines. I challenged you, she said. I was going to test you in combat. I thought you were some careless human who did not understand protocol, who needed to learn respect. Her hand dropped. And you are someone who already saved my life. To be fair, Finn said, I did walk into your training ground without permission. That part was legitimately careless. The scanner really is in here somewhere. By the way, I wasn't lying about that. This turned away, her shoulders tight. How do I challenge someone who carried me to safety? How do I test someone I owe a life debt to? This is not how Valente honor works. We do not fight those who saved us. You didn't know, Finn pointed out. You can't owe someone when you don't know who they are. That's not how debt works. It is exactly how debt works, Thysson said. She turned back to him, and her expression had shifted into something complicated. The debt existed whether I knew or not. I have carried it for 8 years, without knowing where to place it. And now I find it belongs to a human security specialist who loses scanners and makes jokes about memorial plaques. Finn picked up his shirt, pulling it back on. The moment felt like it needed something, some acknowledgement of weight, but he'd never been good at serious conversations. Look, if it helps, I didn't save you personally. It was a team operation. We'll play our part. I just happen to be the one with the best carrying capacity. You minimize, this said. Humans do this. They make small what is large, make light what is heavy. It is. She searched for words. It is maddening. It's a coping mechanism. Finn said. We minimize or we drown. Your choice, which seems better. Thyssen studied him for a long moment, and Finn had the uncomfortable sensation of being evaluated on levels he didn't understand. Finally, she nodded once, sharp and decisive. The challenge is withdrawn, she said formally. I do not fight those I owe life debt to. This is Valente law. So, I don't get my ass kicked today. Finn said. That's honestly the best news I've had all week. Instead, Thyssen continued. You will tell me about the operation, about how you found me, how you fought through the facility, what happened after you handed me to your medical team. I have carried pieces of that night, for 8 years. I want the whole picture. Finn found a scanner wedged under equipment rack, picked it up, and turned back to Thyssen. She was waiting, patient, and immovable as a moon in orbit. Okay, he said, but this is going to take a while. And I'm going to need coffee. Maybe something stronger than coffee. Do Valente do alcohol? Wedo, Thyssen said. And I know a place on the station where they do not ask questions. The place Thyssen knew turned out to be a maintenance observation deck that technically wasn't supposed to be accessible to personnel, which Finn appreciated because it suggested even legendary Valen commanders sometimes bent the rules. The deck overlooked one off the station's docking bays through reinforced transparel, and someone had left a container of what smelled like Valentine alcohol behind a conduit housing. So this is where warriors come to hide, Finn said, accepting the flask Thyssen offered. He took a careful sip and felt his throat burn in ways that suggested the liquid might also function as starship fuel. Good to know we're not so different. This sat on the deck floor, her back against the wall, looking less like a legendary commander and more like someone tired of carrying weight. Tell me, she said. Start from the beginning. Finn sat across from her, the flask between them like a negotiation point. The beginning was intelligence intercepts suggesting the Corvin Confederacy had captured a Valente operative. This was 8 years ago when the Coalition and the Valente Empire were still figuring out if cooperation was possible or if we just end up shooting each other eventually. Someone high up decided rescuing you might prove humans could be trusted. Politics, this said, taking the flask back. Everything is politics. Everything just politics. Finn agreed. So they sent Shadow Lance. We specialized in operations nobody wanted to acknowledge officially. If we succeeded, great. If we failed, the Coalition could deny we existed. Very reassuring for team morale. Thyssen's ears angled forward, that focused attention position. How many oaf you? 8. Finn said. Small team, fast insertion. We had intel about the facility layout from survey data, knew roughly where detention was located, and had about a 3-hour window before Corrin reinforcements would arrive. The plan was get in, get you, get out before anyone noticed. Plans and reality are different things. Thyssen observed. Yeah, we noticed that about 30 seconds after insertion. Finn said. The facility had twice the guard's intelligence suggested, plus automated defense systems that weren't supposed to be there. Someone on the Corvin side was paranoid, which honestly was fair because we were literally breaking into their prison. He took another sip of the alcohol, feeling it burn down into his chest. The memory was surfacing in pieces the way old operations did. Not quite flashbacks, just fragments that had been filed away in whatever part of his brain stored things too intense to think about regularly. We fought through 3 levels, Finn continued. Lost 1 team member to automated turret fire. Lost another to guards who got lucky. By the time we reached detention, we were down to 6 and running out of time. The explosives team had already started the diversion charges, which meant the whole facility was going to turn into chaos in about 4 minutes. Fistan was quiet for a moment. I remember the explosions. I thought they were destroying the prison with me in it. The Corvin interrogator had threatened that, said, if I did not cooperate, they would make my death look like an accident. They were definitely trying to kill you, Finn said. When we breached detention, there were guards inside preparing to execute prisoners. We stopped them, but it wasn't pretty. He paused, remembering the firefight in closed quarters, the way sound compressed in enclosed spaces. You were in the third cell, unconscious or close to it. You'd been beaten pretty badly. This touched her ribs unconsciously, and Finn wondered if she still had scars. 3 weeks off interrogation. They wanted fleet positions, defensive strategies, everything. I told them nothing. I know, Finn said. The intelligence brief mentioned you'd held out. That's part of why the Coalition wanted to rescue you. Proof that Valente could be trusted with sensitive information, that cooperation might actually work. And you carried him. This said. Why you? Why not split the load? Have multiple team members assist? Finn shrugged. I was the biggest guy on the team, and you needed to move fast. Dragging you would have been slower, and you were bleeding enough that we couldn't afford slow. So I picked you up and ran. While making jokes, Fisson added. While making jokes, Finn confirmed. I told you the exit was clearly marked, which was a lie because nothing was clearly marked, and we were basically guessing our way back through smoke and weapons fire. I told you that if you died on me, it would be really awkward because I'd already filed the paperwork for successful extraction. Andy hate redoing paperwork. This made a sound that was definitely a laugh this time. You told a dying warrior that you were concerned about paperwork. You were dying, Finn said. You were badly hurt, but you weren't dying. I could tell because you tried to argue with me about the carrying position. Kept saying something in Valent that I didn't understand, but which sounded argumentative. I was saying you should leave me. Fisson said quietly. That saving one warrior was not worth risking your team. Yeah. Well, we didn't Lustento that. Finn said. We got you to the extraction point, handed you to the medical team, and then we were back on the transport heading out of Odmo. The whole operation took 11 minutes from insertion to extraction. We lost 2 people, but we got you out. This was quiet for a long moment, staring at the docking bay below. Ships were moving in the vast space, automated cargo haulers and military transports, the endless ballet of logistics that kept the station functioning. I woke up 3 days later in a Valentine medical facility. She said finally. They told me humans had rescued me, that it was a gesture of alliance. I asked for names, ranks, anything. They said it was classified, that the operation officially never happened. For 8 years, I have wondered who they were. Those shadows who came when my own people could not reach me. Your people tried, Finn said. The intelligence brief mentioned a Valente extraction team was planning an assault, but they couldn't get authorization in time. Politics again. Someone didn't want to risk open conflict with the Corvin Confederacy over one captured warrior. But humans risked it. Fisson said humans had less to lose. Finn pointed out. We weren't at war with the Corvin. We could call it a humanitarian operation. Claim we were just rescuing a prisoner of war. If it went wrong, we'd apologize and pair operations. Your empire couldn't do that without looking weak. This stood abruptly, pacing to the transparent window. I have built my career on that night. The warrior who survived Corvin interrogation, who was rescued by mysterious humans, who came back stronger. People call me the Ghost of Meridian because of operations I ran after recovering. But it all traces back to that prison cell to you carrying Methra fire. That's a lot of pressure to put on one carrying job. Finn said, I just did what the mission required. Any of my team would have done the same. But they did not, this said. Turning back to face him. You did, and now I challenge you to combat, and find myself unable to follow through, because Valente honor forbids fighting those we owe life debts to. It is, she searched for words. It is extremely frustrating. I'm sensing a pattern where I frustrate you, Finn said. First by walking into your training ground. Now by having saved your life. I'm very good at being inconvenient, this almost smiled. You are infuriating. You make jokes about everything. You minimize your own actions. You act as if rescuing me was equivalent to retrieving a lost scanner, that I am my defense, Finn said. Both involve carrying things I'd rather not drop. The alert came through their comm units simultaneously. a priority notification that made Bodhoffam stiffen. Finn pulled his communicator, reading the message, and felt something cold settle in his stomach. Security breach, he said. Unauthorized access to personnel quarters specifically. He looked up at this then. My quarters. Thison's warrior persona snapped back into place instantly. We go now. They ran through the station corridors, Finn leading because he knew the security routes better. This den keeping pace easily despite her longer stride having to adjust to the confined spaces, personnel scattered out of their way. Recognizing both the human security specialist and the Valente commander moving with purpose. Finn's quarters were in the human residential section, a small room that barely qualified as living space. When they arrived, the door was open and his belongings were scattered across the floor, like someone had conducted a very aggressive search. They were looking for something, this said, scanning the room with professional assessment. Finn stepped inside carefully, noting what was missing. His personal data pad, the encrypted storage drive he kept with mission records, the jacket he'd worn during various operations, the one with the shadow lance patch sewn inside the lining. They were looking for evidence, Finn said slowly. Evidence about operations I was part of. Evidence about things I witnessed. What things? Thyssen asked. Finn turned to face her. War crimes, civilian massacres on Corvin IV. Things the Confederacy did during the conflicts. Things I documented because someone needed to. Things that are currently part of tribunal proceedings. The second alert came through before this could respond. Station security, reporting hostile contact in the corridor outside residential section. 7. Weapons fire detected. They are not searching, this then said, her voice gone cold and lethal. They are hunting and you are the target. The weapons fire was getting closer, which Finn decided was a good reason to stop standing in his ransacked quarters like a target at a shooting range. Thyssen had already moved to the doorway. Her body language shifted into combat mode, and Finn grabbed the emergency kit he kept under his bunk, because planning ahead was how you avoided dying stupidly. How many? Finn asked, pulling out the plasma pistol that technically wasn't authorized for security specialists, but which he'd kept anyway because rules were more like suggestions when people were shooting at you. Thyssen tilted her head, those elongated ears tracking sounds. 4, maybe 5 moving in tactical formation. Professional mercenaries, Finn said. The Corvin Confederacy is facing tribunal proceedings for war crimes. I documented civilian massacres during extraction operations, including Granite Shield. Someone wants that evidence gone and me dead before I can testify. They chose poorly, this said, and something in her voice made Finn glad she was on his side. This corridor has 3 access points and 1 maintenance shaft. We use the shaft, move to auxiliary security station, call for backup. Or Finn said, we could stay here and die heroically. That I've always wondered what heroic death feels like. Probably overrated. Thyssen grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the maintenance access panel. You will not die today. I owe you a life debt. Valente honor requires I protect you. That's really sweet, Finn said, prying open the panel. But I'm pretty sure honor doesn't stop bullets. The maintenance shaft was exactly as uncomfortable as Finn remembered from his last inspection, which meant barely wide enough for human shoulders and definitely not designed for Valente proportions. This squeezed in anyway, moving with efficiency that suggested she'd fought in worse spaces. They crawled through darkness, lit only by emergency strips, hearing weapons fire echo through the residential section behind them. They are destroying your quarters, Thyssen said thorough. I didn't like that place anyway, Finn said. The climate control was terrible, and my neighbor played music at 3 o'clock in the morning. This is basically doing me a favor. They emerged in a service corridor 2 levels down, and Finn immediately accessed the wall terminal to pull up station schematics. The auxiliary security station was 3 corridors away, but the mercenaries had probably predicted that route. Finn traced an alternate path, through environmental control, through the air recycling section. He said, it's longer, but less obvious. It is also where they will expect us to go if we are trying to avoid obvious routes, Thyssen pointed out. They are professionals. They think tactically. So we go obviously, Finn said. Straight through the main corridor. Fast and aggressive, and hope they're too busy being clever to expect stupid. Fison stared at him. This is human military strategy. This is my military strategy, Finn corrected. I never claimed it was good. They ran through the main corridor, Finn leading because he knew the station layout, and this den covering their rear because she was better at the whole combat thing. Personnel scattered, alarms were blaring, and somewhere station security was probably trying to figure out what was happening, but Finn had learned that security response time was inversely proportional to how much you needed it. The mercenaries appeared at the intersection ahead, 4 of them in tactical gear that marked them as former Corvan military. Finn saw the weapons coming up and threw himself sideways, pulling this den with him into a side passage as plasma fire scorched the wall where they'd been standing. Your stupid plan is not working, Fison said, returning fire with a sidearm she'd apparently been carrying this whole time. It's working fine, Finn said. We're still alive. That's my Vaseline for success. What followed was brutal and desperate and exactly the kind of combat Finn had hoped to avoid by becoming a security specialist instead of staying in special operations. They fought through the corridor using cover that wasn't designed for cover, trading fire with mercenaries who clearly hadn't expected a Valentine commander to be present and invested in keeping Finn alive. This moved like water, smooth and deadly, her combat style honed from years off warfare. Finn moved like someone who'd been trained well, but was deeply out of practice, compensating with tactical thinking and a willingness to use the environment creatively. When one mercenary tried to flank them, Finn triggered an emergency bulkhead seal that trapped the attacker in a compartment. When another tried suppressing fire, Fison closed the distance faster than Finn thought possible and disabled him with strikes that looked effortless. You fight well, Fison said, dropping behind cover as more plasma fire stitched across the walls. For someone who makes jokes about memorial plaques, I contain multitudes, Finn said. Also, I really don't want to die before I finish that series I've been watching. The last season just dropped and I have questions. Station security finally arrived. Armored personnel with actual heavy weapons, and the remaining mercenaries retreated into the station's lower levels. Finn slumped against the wall, breathing hard, while this den remained alert and scanning for additional threats. Coalition officers appeared along with Valente command staff, everyone wanting to know what had happened and why a legendary commander and a security specialist had just fought mercenaries through residential corridors. The explanation took hours. Finn's documentation of Corvan war crimes, the tribunal proceedings, the mercenaries sent to eliminate him before he could testify, the evidence he'd stored, the data pad they'd stolen, the backup copies he'd kept in classified security servers because he'd learned paranoia was survival. Through it all, Fison stayed beside him, her presence making it clear that whatever happened to Finn would have to go through her first. When the immediate crisis was handled, when the mercenaries were captured and the station was secure, Finn found himself alone with Fison in a conference room that smelled like recycled air and exhaustion. You saved me life, Finn said. Again, technically. Or I saved yours 8 years ago, and you returned the favor today. So maybe we're even now. This shook her head. Life debts do not work that way. You carried me when I could not walk. I fought beside you when you were hunted. These are not transactions that cancel each other. They are bonds. Bonds. Finn repeated. That sounds serious. I'm not good with serious. I noticed. Fison said. You make jokes when people shoot at you. You minimize everything. You act as if being targeted for assassination is inconvenient rather than terrifying. It's a coping mechanism. Finn said. I either laugh or scream, and laughing uses less oxygen. We covered this. This moved closer, and Finn found himself looking up slightly to meet her eyes. The challenge is withdrawn, she said. Not because you are incapable, because I do not fight those I owe life debts to, and because I have seen you fight. You are worthy of respect. So no combat, Finn said. My ribs are very grateful. No combat, Fison confirmed, but also no distance. We are connected now, human, by the past, by today, by the debt I carry, and the one you now carry because I protected you. This is not something either of us can walk away from. Finn thought about the tattoo on his back that had frozen a legendary warrior, about carrying someone through fire 8 years ago, about fighting beside her today in corridors that weren't designed for warfare. So what do? Form a support group for people with complicated military histories. We work together. This said simply. You need protection until the tribunal concludes. I need to ensure the debt I owe is honored. The solution is obvious. You're going to follow me around the station, making sure no one shoots me. Finn said. That's going to be great for my reputation. People will think I need a bodyguard. You do need a bodyguard, Fisson pointed out. People just tried to kill you. Fair point, Finn admitted. He extended his hand. Human gesture of agreement. Okay, we work together. But I'm picking where I eat because I've tried Valentine rations, and they taste like punishment. This took his hand, her grip strong and warm. Agreed. But I choose the training schedule. You fight well, but you are out of practice. I was afraid you'd notice that. Finn said. Can the training schedule include breaks for that series I'm watching? Because seriously, I have questions about the last season. Humans, Fisson said, but she was almost smiling. You survive assassination attempts and worry about entertainment programming. It's called having priorities, Finn said. You should try it sometime. They left the conference room together, Finn collecting his backup data pad, and this then walking beside him, like she decided he was worth guarding permanently. The station continued its endless routine around them, humans and Valente working in uneasy cooperation. But something had shifted. The tattoo on Finn's back had frozen a warrior. And in that frozen moment, two people who'd intersected 8 years ago had finally found each other again. Later, when Coalition Command asked Finn if he needed anything else for his testimony preparation, he said he was fine. When Valente Command asked this then, why she was personally guarding a human security specialist, she said it was a matter of honor. Neither of them mentioned the life debts or the rescue mission or the fact that sometimes the people you save end up saving you back, because some things didn't need official documentation. They just needed to be lived.